Hi, everybody. This is Alpha. I'm the host of Stories from Behind the Counter. Before we get started in any of these episodes, I just wanted to give a little disclaimer. Some of these stories are not exactly family friendly, especially not very child friendly. Some of them do use some strong language. Some of them do talk about some rather vile things sometimes. Others is just not exactly something some people might want their children or anyone else around them to hear. Not exactly public friendly. If you have a job in general, you know what I'm talking about. Some things that happen in life are just not public, perfect conversation. So, with that in mind, please keep in mind where you're listening to this, who you're listening to it around, and how you're going to listen to it. Also, if you have any stories that you would like to share with me, please send them my way. I am always up for more stories. I only have so much as my own. So if you have anything you want to share with me, please feel free to share them with me in my email account. Send them to workwithalphag@gmail.com. That is workwithalphag@gmail.com. One last thing I wanted to remind you all about is please make sure you're following me. I am not just on one platform. I am on Spotify, Patreon, Castbox, Podbean, and Buzzsprout. So please, if you have any of those, Patreon is probably going to help me out the best, and hopefully later on it'll be able to help you guys out as well. For $1 a month, you'll be getting ad-free episodes, as well as later on I'm hoping to be able to do Q&As, just be able to talk with you guys, one-on-one conversations, group chats, whatever. So please make sure you're checking it all out. Let's get into the episode. Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Stories from Behind the Counter, and as always, I'm your host, Alpha. I just want to give another big shout out to everyone who's been listening and supporting me throughout all these episodes. Thank you so much. All of you guys are just awesome. Stay fabulous. I appreciate you guys. This is episode 13. So, as much as I was trying to get some spooky stories here, I really only have one to start out with. This was when I was working at a small retail store. I had just recently been hired. I was promoted within a month to assistant manager, and I'm set to open. Now, the store manager who had hired me was, I believe, going on vacation. So I knew she wasn't going to be in. It was just me. I come in, start doing my usual routine. Now, I have my music on, but I usually have songs and stuff that I know what's going on. While I'm working, randomly, I just hear, "Hey, Jeremy, I need you up here at the front real fast, please." Okay, it's 2 hours before we open. Like I said, my store manager is on vacation. I know she's not in. Who the fuck was that? So I set down my stuff. I go and I check the entire store. I don't find anyone. All of the doors are locked. And I even went back and looked on camera. I don't see anyone, but I could see my reaction on camera when I heard it. Super weird. Well, I ended up getting past it, worked through the rest of the day. A couple days later, when my store manager came back, she came in and said, "Hey, so how'd everything go?" I looked at her and I said, "How many weird experiences have you had?" I didn't even have to explain. I knew she knew what I was talking about. But she just looked at me and said, "I don't know what you're talking about," with a very innocent look on her face, and just walked away. So that pretty much just told me she was one of those people, if you don't acknowledge it, you don't give it power. I gotta admit, I did have plenty more strange happenings at that store plenty of times, either before we opened or even after we closed. One time I was closing, and after we had locked up the doors, I'm in the office counting down the money. My closing associate is out there. She's cleaning up and everything. We get done right before I set the alarm. all we hear is something down an aisle drop. And we look over. It's just one random box. Okay, whatever. That happens sometimes. Maybe it was just unbalanced and it finally slipped. And then something 3 aisles over fell. We go in and we check that out. Okay. Weird, but still nothing crazy. 3 separate things in 3 separate aisles fell all at once at that point. My coworker and I just kind of looked at each other and said, "I'm ready to go home. How about you?" And we locked up the store and we left. That was very interesting times. I don't know if anything ever happened at that location, whether it was before or after the store was built. I don't know, but I feel like there was someone or something there. Luckily enough, they were usually more mischievous and pranksterish than malicious. So I'll take it. Luckily enough, I don't work there anymore, and it's no longer a worry for me. But sadly, that is the only strange story I have for this wonderful 13th episode. So, that being said, let's get into some of the other stories I have. Talking about some Windex in the eyes, trucks catching on fire on the highway, and lots of other crazy stuff. Let's get into it. So, for this story, we're talking about the time the Windex got into my eyes while I was working at a fast food place. So, I'm working the closing shift, like I said, at a fast food place, and one of my coworkers comes up to me and says, "Hey, Alpha, the Windex dispenser isn't working properly." So, of course, I ask, "Well, what do you mean? How is it broke?" And she says, "Well, it's easier to show you." So, I start walking back toward the dispenser, but just so you know what the setup is like, what I'm dealing with here. We have 3 little boxes on the wall with small hoses that come out, and it helps you fill up the cleaning bottles easily and quickly. The hose that connects to the box has split right where the box and the hose meet. Like the hose is jammed up into the little box, but the hose broke right at that seam, pretty much. So, as soon as my coworker activates the dispenser, it just shoots out the Windex like a jet directly into my eyes across the back room. I was probably like 10 feet away and it still shot me directly into my eyes. Naturally, I turned and kind of screamed a little bit. I rushed over to the sink because at that point we didn't have an actual eye washing station there. It was inside of a giant grocery store we were part of, and I didn't know where they were. Knew they weren't that close, so I just kind of panicked and I rushed to the sink, tried to wash it out as best I can. But I personally have a huge phobia of stuff coming near my eyes. Like, so bad I have to close my eyes when I'm putting my own glasses on, y'all. So having Windex in my eyes, not very fun. I was freaking out. And needless to say, because I can't stand stuff going near my eyes or in my eyes, I'm not able to properly wash them out very well because my eyes just keep wanting to close, naturally. My coworker felt absolutely awful. For the next month, she just kept apologizing. She offered to buy me food on break if she didn't see me eating. She made sure I was taken care of for like months on, and she felt god-awful. My manager, on the other hand, we called my manager over. We told him what had happened and that I needed to go to the ER. He responds with, "Well, what do you mean it's broken?" And he ignores everything else. He starts walking over to the dispenser and he shoots himself in the eyes before we could even stop him or try to explain anything. Like me, he rushes over to the sink, washes his eyes out, and goes, "Whew, all right, we're good. Let's get back to work." Yeah, at this point, I reiterated that I needed to go to the ER, and now he probably should too. But he just brushes it off and says, "We're fine, let's get back to work." And he goes back up front. I said, fuck that. I went outside, smoked a cigarette, called my general manager at the time, and explained everything that had just happened. After she heard everything, she just answered without hesitation, "Don't even clock out. Just tell him I will see him in a minute. And then I'm going to meet you at the ER." And she hung up. So when I came back in, I told my manager that also sprayed himself in the eyes that the GM would be in shortly, and that she told me to go to the ER without clocking out. I walk over to the ER, I'm calling my family, my significant other, everything like that at the time. And I get to the ER, explain what happened. They say, well, I'm glad you came in. That's a lot of chemicals. We don't know exactly how much got in there. We need to make sure you're not going to go blind. Well, that entails them having to not just rinse my eyes out more, they also have to do a chemical testing of my eye, which is pretty much taking what looks like a test strip for a pool or a spa. It tells you how much chlorine and blah, blah, blah is in there. Well, they pretty much have to scrape one of those along my eye, and it takes 3 nurses, my general manager, and my significant other at the time to hold me down while they're scraping my eye and rinsing everything out. It was awful. Luckily enough, my GM was very supportive the entire time. She let me take some time off, and she wrote up the other manager for endangering a team member's safety. And most thankfully, there wasn't any permanent damage to my eyes. I'd already been wearing glasses since junior high, and it didn't seem to affect my prescription too much worse. Only thing it really affected is definitely did not help my phobia of shit going near my eyes at this point. And side note, just for anyone wondering, when I say I walked to the hospital, walked to the ER, it was literally across the street and next door, less than like a 5-minute walk away, in a town that I have lived in my whole life. Even if I was 100% blind, I probably could have made it there alone. But I think on that note, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next story. This next story is actually another one from Sunshine. Thank you again, Sunshine, for writing in. I enjoy hearing your stories and hearing about the scrap world. It's very interesting from the couple of things you've sent me so far, so I'm interested in this one. This is Sunshine's keg story. Sunshine says, while working for a scrapyard, I've had a few random and crazy things happen, but this one in particular sticks out in my head. We get customers that are basic everyday people bringing in scrap from home or personal businesses, and sometimes we even get business from bigger companies as well. So it's not unusual to have a full-sized semi show up with random scrap that they need to dump. But this time, we had a full-size semi come in full of nothing but what looked like brand new metal kegs, like beer kegs. The driver comes in. He explains he was given this task to come and scrap all of this metal and didn't have a lot of paperwork that was needed. For those who are unaware, as this is a rather unique thing, kegs are actually very highly regulated. So whether it's got beer or any other liquid in it, or they're empty, the kegs themselves are very highly regulated and monitored. Not to mention, they actually do cost a pretty penny, especially depending on what kind of metal it's made out of. Well, without all the proper paperwork, I can't do anything with this load yet. So I get whatever paperwork he does have that shows the company he picked it up from, the company he works for, all that stuff. And I don't really think the paperwork he did have was complete, which was even more sketchy than I already expected at this point. Well, I do my due diligence. I call all of these companies, I email anyone I can from these places, call my own boss, and essentially just covered my ass, and I tried to get all the information I could on what I actually needed to move forward. It took almost a full day, but I finally got a hold of someone from the company that owned the kegs and was trying to ship them out. They had no clue what I was talking about. It turns out, someone either leaked some of their info or possibly hacked their company and got some of the info for the shipment. And the hacker hired somebody to come and pick up the trailer to scrap the metal and make 100% profit on something that wasn't even theirs. They call it a fictitious pickup scheme. I never found out for sure how they got that info or whatever, but I know I ended up having to call the cops on the driver. I had to make a report about an entire stolen truck of brand new kegs, and I even had to try and stall the driver for time so that the cops could get there without telling him the cops were on their way. The driver himself was not arrested or charged with anything, as he and his company seemed to just be hired by someone to do a job, and that someone just happened to be a scammer. I don't think they could even find a connection that these guys were doing this intentionally or actually involved with the person. So the police just told him, hey, you need to book it. You need to get this truck back to its original place that you picked it up from and return it to its real owners. A couple of days later, I ended up getting a thank you email from the company that owned the kegs and probably wouldn't have caught this until it was too late. If I hadn't gone out of my way to make sure everything was in order before I did anything, they could have made some real good money. It turns out that the one truckload was over $95,000. I never heard anything else on if they tracked down the mastermind of the scheme, but luckily enough, they got their product back, and we never had to go to court for anything. They even recognized me for doing my job. It was all quite interesting, to say the least. This is me speaking as Alpha again. That one is a very interesting story. I personally did not realize that kegs themselves, just the storage containers themselves, were A, worth so much, or B, as regulated as they were. So I'm glad you thought about that and you didn't have to deal with any further drama past what you had to deal with. That kind of blows me away that something that highly regulated can still slip through the cracks. Well, in this case, almost slipped through the cracks. You caught it before it got too far, but that one's pretty insane. Thank you, Sunshine. Looks like the next one is another one from Sunshine. This is another interesting one about random people who come in. Sunshine says, I get a lot of people that come through my yard, and sometimes it'd be people that you wouldn't expect. I get all people from all different walks of life. People look possibly homeless, people look a little on the redneck side, and even some higher class clientele that look like they don't really belong at a scrapyard. But either way, we always try to help everybody out. No matter what, everyone's a customer, they all want something done, they all have a job to do, and so do we. But one time, he did have one guy came in, and let's just say he was a very stereotypical gay man. At one point, this man was coming in very regularly, which, again, is a scrapyard. So he's wearing leather pants that look like they were spray painted on, and he would act like he was just better than everyone else every time he was there, even though it seemed like this was the best way the guy could supplement his own income. But one day he was being a bit of a jerk to the people, acting like he was better than anyone there, and wearing these pants that, shall we say, do not leave much to the imagination. Sunshine said he could see a little bubble in the front of his pants and realized that it wasn't a bubble, it was the guy's penis. All he could think was, damn, no wonder you act like an ass. I hope you're a grower, not a shower, because all I see is a baby carrot in there. Check your attitude. Anywho, that being said, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next story. This story is from my friend. We're going to call her Lily. Lily is a friend that I used to work with at a very big retail store. She eventually started working for a locally owned gas station on the side of a highway in a little town in Arizona. Well, one day, this random guy was driving down the highway, and somehow the gas tank that he had in the bed of his truck had caught on fire. So, naturally, what does he do? He brilliantly decides to pull into the gas station closest to him, even though his truck is on fire. Now, luckily enough, he stayed fairly far away from the pumps themselves, but soon after he got out of the truck, the cans pretty much exploded, and the entire truck was engulfed in flames very quickly. The guy himself was very lucky to have gotten out when he did, and even more lucky that he didn't do any major damage to the gas station. Needless to say, that was a rather scary moment for my friend that was working, but in the end, they got the truck extinguished. No one and nothing else got hurt, and it turned out as okay as it could have been for that situation. I gotta admit, that would be pretty scary too. I would probably run off of property not trusting it, because if that gas station goes up, probably a good 2 blocks are going to go up. But I'm glad it turned out, for lack of a better term, all right. But on that note, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next story as well. This next story is another one of mine from when I worked at a big retail place overnights. At the time, I lived close by, so I would usually walk home on lunch and walk back to work. Back then, the town was safe enough. You could usually walk around fairly safe at around 2 a.m. And as I get back, I see some guy in this classic creeper van with little to no windows just parked very weirdly. He was taking up like 2 or 3 spaces. And he just sticks his head out and he goes, "Hey, you want a cookie?" Now, at this point, I'm a little skinny guy in his early 20s. I wasn't going to risk dealing with some creep like this. My mama taught me right. Never take food from a stranger. That's just super suspect as shit. I wasn't doing it. So I, as politely as possible, said no and continued walking away, praying that he wouldn't follow me, because I didn't have anyone else in the parking lot to be a witness if anything happened. Well, luckily enough, he doesn't follow me. I get back inside the store, get back to work. Later on, I'm telling some of my coworkers about what had happened, and everyone agreed with me that it was super creepy and weird. But one of my coworkers, who was also, I believe, in his 20s at the time, was about 5 foot flat and looked like he was 15. He said he would have taken the cookies, no problem. We all started busting up laughing and told him he would have been kidnapped for sure. A little bit later on, we went out to break, and he tried asking which van had the cookies and if it was still there. I couldn't deal with it. I put out my cigarette and I just went inside. Said, "I'm not getting you kidnapped. Sorry, dude." Alright, moving on to the next story. This one is another story from Mandy. Thanks for writing in again, Mandy. Your stories have always been interesting, so let's see what we got here. Mandy says, "I was working at a popular retail place. One afternoon, probably about 1 p.m. or so, I'm working on a register that happened to be facing toward the main exit doors. I'm ringing up this lady, making small talk with her, and the next thing we know, there's some really loud shouting coming from the area of the front doors and by the service desk area. So, naturally, we both stop talking and we look in the direction to see what's going on. When we looked over, there were 2 middle-aged women there. One of them worked there, as was evident by her vest, and the other didn't. They were yelling at each other so loud, it was now echoing throughout the entire store. Right as we start looking, the associate straight uppercuts the other woman, knocking her into a lined-up row of shopping carts and proceeds to just keep going after her. Security rushes over, along with management, and they manage to separate the 2 women, as the women at the service desk proceed to call the cops. As they get the situation settled, I go back to ringing up my customer and try to move on with my day. I ended up finding out later that the 2 women's kids had a baby together, and there was some sort of crazy grandma drama that led to the whole fiasco. Apparently, the grannies from Granny Fight Club forgot the rules of Granny Fight Club. This is me speaking as Alpha again. Holy crap, that one's pretty well insane too. I mean, I'm pretty sure I have another story from Miss Fabulous where she talks about someone taking off their fake leg and threatening to beat somebody with it, but that did not escalate that far. That is insane. Alright, guys, just a couple more stories and we're going to wrap this one up. So this first one is from someone who wrote in. They're just going to call themselves CS. CS says, "To preface my story, my store sells cold sandwiches that are made in store. I had a couple come in up to my register with a couple of these sandwiches. They had taken the sandwiches out of the containers and had them on plates. Not totally out of the norm for our store. They were going to pay and afterwards handed me the containers and said, 'Here, you can have these so you can reuse them.' I responded with, 'Oh, no. We can't do that. We don't reuse these. That wouldn't be very sanitary.' She asked if we recycled them, and I responded telling her that, 'No, I'm afraid we don't recycle them.' She then quickly responded with, 'Oh, so you like killing fish then?' I was stunned. I tried ignoring it, so I asked if they would like a bag. They took the plastic bag, and they left. In my head, I was surprised that they would take a plastic bag after being so upset for us not recycling and for accusing me of liking to kill fish. My coworker was losing her mind laughing after they left. Some people. This is me speaking as Alpha again. That's definitely an interesting one. Definitely not the worst one I've heard. I've had somebody throw a coffee at me because it wasn't up to their standards. People get interesting. If I haven't told that story, I'll have to review my episodes. But if I haven't told the story about the guy throwing the caramel macchiato at me, I'll have to go back through and record that one. Anywho, we're going to go ahead and move on to the last one. This is from another fan. She wrote in. She calls herself Lady Pirate. Lady Pirate says, "This is when I was working the front register at a hospital cafe. I was working the evening shift. An elderly gentleman came in to pick up a snack and a drink, as his son was in the emergency room. As I rang up his merchandise, I am asking him how he is and if he found everything all right. He said yes. I tell him his total. He hands me a $10 bill, which I lay on the top of the open drawer, not putting it in the drawer. I always wait until after the transaction is finished. I proceed with giving him his change back for the $10 bill, and he immediately starts telling me that he gave me a $50. I say, I'm so sorry, sir, but you just gave me a $10 bill, and I showed him what he gave me as it was still sitting on top of the drawer. He then starts yelling and causing a scene. I told him, okay, well, let me get someone else to open a different register so that I can close mine and count down my drawer. I have to be sure. I can't just give you the change for a $50 without the verification. That obviously does not make him very happy. So I then call my manager up to the front to explain the situation. She then speaks to the gentleman that what I'm doing is actually procedure. He continues to stand there swearing, calling me a liar and a thief, while I count down my drawer and he's pacing back and forth, yelling the entire time. I finally finish counting my drawer, and, well, it's correct. I'm not over, I'm not short, it's perfectly fine. He did not give me a $50. I told him, I'm sorry, but you must be mistaken, and my manager asked him to leave. He refused and said he was not leaving until he got his money back. He was really angry, so we called security and they escorted him out. Then, later that night, he called to apologize. He said that when he got home, he spoke to his wife, letting her know what had happened. At the end of the story, she started laughing at him and said, "Oh, honey, don't you remember? You gave me that $50 this morning so I could get gas for the car. Remember?" All I can say is, at least he did call to apologize. I do have more stories to send your way. Keep your eyes peeled. This is me speaking as Alpha again. Thank you so much, Lady Pirate. That one was a very interesting story. I'm glad you had security around to help you. I will never understand the people who can't keep track of their money. I understand he was going through a lot. His son was in the ER. I'm sure he had a lot of things on his mind. He probably just forgot. But boy, the way people act sometimes. On that note, I think we're going to go ahead and call this an episode. Thanks again for listening, guys. Obviously, I try to keep everyone's identities safe so that they can be protected so there's no backlash from any of these companies or anyone else for any reason whatsoever. So for everyone sending in their stories, I thank you. Whatever I call you on the show is all you will ever be known as. With that being said, I want to give a big shout out and a big thank you to Denise Esparza for the artwork. She's the one who did the little thumbnail that you see when I upload all of my episodes, and I do look forward to working with her for any changes in artwork that I decide to do later. If you're interested in seeing anything else and more artwork that she does, you can follow her on Nisi Art on Instagram. That's NEISSE_ART on Instagram. Also, big shout out and a thank you to Nivation. He's the one responsible for the music you hear at the beginning and the ending of the episodes. If you wish to follow him and see what else he provides musically, that is Nivation. Spotify is the only platform that he gave me to shout him out on, but I just wanted to make sure he got the credit for what he did for me. I really do appreciate everything you guys have done for me to help me get this show started and to keep it going. Thank you guys. I really honestly could not have done this without you. For everyone else, thank you again for all your stories. I hope that you guys are enjoying this. One last reminder, please do not forget to check me out. Pretty much anywhere you can find a podcast, that's where I'm trying to get to. Obviously, the biggest ones I'm going to be on are Patreon and Spotify, but check me out, see where you can find me. Patreon will be the biggest help for me, and as I'm pretty sure I've stated before, that will also help you guys later on. I'm hoping to be able to do live Q&As. I'm hoping to be able to do conversations, one-on-one chats, group chats. I don't care. Maybe like some of the other people I've listened to doing podcasts, we can even make trips out of this and just make it a community. I just want to have fun with this. So I hope you guys are enjoying it, and I hope you can help make the community I'm looking to make. Thanks again, guys. This is Alpha signing off. See you next episode.